welcome to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. I am your host, Susie Botello, and you're listening to episode 94. The International Mobile Film Festival in San Diego is actually gearing up for the 10th anniversary edition, coming up on the last weekend of April, this April, 2021. Can you believe we're here? Our guest for this podcast episode is Jennifer Zhang, and our guest is actually pretty close to San Diego, so there's no doubt that once this pandemic is over, we will be able to meet Jennifer here in San Diego and share more of her stories. But in this episode, we're going to talk about a film that she shot with an iPhone 8 Plus. It's an hour and 13 minutes and 19 seconds, just to be a little exact. And the film was not only shot with her iPhone, but it was also edited on her iPhone with a special app, which usually is not used for editing movies. But we'll let her share her story and some of the challenges that she had and how this all came about. It's a great story. She's going to share a lot of tips. She's going to share some struggles, and she's going to share some of the other things that she does. She is also a music performer, a singer, and she writes as well. And she actually does a lot of things, and I think that I will leave that for her to share them with you. You're going to have a lot of fun during this episode, and I'm really excited to share Jennifer Zhang with all of you. Hey everybody, I am here with a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Zhang. She made a feature film, and we are going to talk about that feature film. But Jennifer is right next door to San Diego. She's in LA. She's a very, very creative and experienced and very talented and skilled person. I could come up with more, Jennifer.
I'm just glowing now. I feel, can we just hang out together all the time so I can just feel this way all the time?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's hang out for about an hour.
Perfect. I'll take it.
I was talking to Jennifer. We are going to actually do this little thing after this episode, and I wanted to let you guys know, I'm talking to all our listeners, Jennifer. This thing that we're going to do, where I'm going to ask you a secret question, and you're going to give me the secret answer to the secret question. And the secret is, well, let me let out part of that secret, guys. We're gonna publish that part of the podcast on our Patreon page, and I'll put a link in the notes. And are you're okay with that, right, Jennifer?
Oh, I love it. I love secret schemes. Let's do it.
All right. Okay, so everybody, I introduce you to Jennifer. And Jennifer, why don't we just begin a little bit in telling us a little bit about Jennifer and who she is, meaning you, and what brought you into this whole world of all the talented stuff you do, because you don't just make movies.
Oh yeah, no, I'm one of those LA people, which I have to, I like to self-deprecate about it, right? But the truth of the matter is entertainment is so competitive. And especially if you're like a woman of color, you have to, you have to make sure you're covering as many bases as possible to try to get opportunities, right? I think that's changing now a little bit more, which is very heartening. But like over the course of my life, knowing as a child that I wanted to be involved in the arts and I wanted to reach mass audiences, I just worked on everything. And I've had that attitude about anything I tried, right? Like if I was going to sing, I was going to try to learn how to make an album professionally, right? If I was going to learn how to do martial arts, I wanted to make sure that I could do them at a level that might be acceptable for on screen one day, and really dedicate myself to it. If I was going to be a writer, which is I would say my main passion, I was going to go really, really hard at it. And I've, written even as a child, would come home from school, do my homework, and then write until past midnight, even in elementary school. So, so it's, I'm hoping that makes me sound like less of a jerk when I say that I do a lot of things, right?
What inspired you though to be that way?
I think, my family, they're immigrants, and for better or for worse, one of the things that I think a lot of immigrant families impress upon their children is the idea that like life is a struggle, right? Um, and that you have to that nothing is worth doing unless you're working really hard at it and you're really struggling to get better. And the thing about that is, as painful as that is as a concept to like try to relate to a kid, it's so important because you get used to pain, you get used to struggle, and that makes everything that you try something that you could potentially excel at because you're willing to put yourself through a little bit more to get results. So I know that's not the most uplifting inspiration, but it's like if I wanted to if I wanted to put together an album, like I feel like I've sung in a serious way all my life, and I want to put together an album, and then you look at all the costs associated with it, right? Where you're just like, oh my God, it's not just standing in front of a mic. You have to pay for like studio time. You have to pay an engineer. You have to pay for it to be mixed and mastered. You have to pay for the CDs to get pressed and the distribution. And any one of those things can certainly, any one of those things can trip you up at any point, right? I don't have the money for that. I don't know any sound engineers. I don't even know anything about the business. Like there's so many things associated with the creative process that can discourage you, that if you've got the skill set to be like, I'm going to overcome every single one of these hurdles, that's what gets you the end result. And all of it is painful. This isn't all, it's like joyful, but painful at the same time to do anything, consummately, I guess is the word. So, I feel like
it's like me trying to bake a cake. It's like, oh my God, it's such a pain. But then you know what I mean? It's all worth it at the end when, even though it looks pretty bad, at least it tastes good, right?
Exactly. Well, and it's like, it's about the component parts, right? That's the,
yeah.
Everything is manageable as long as you could be like, how do I get from like this mess of ingredients to this beautiful cake, or not beautiful, but tasty cake. Right. And it's,
well, for most people, it's probably beautiful.
Oh, you're so sweet. It's funny. I mean, I relate to like self-deprecation. Those are like good people, people who can self-deprecate. So it's like a marker that I look for. But yeah, I'm sure your baking is great.
So you basically, you like to write, you like to sing,
mm-hmm.
and you started producing your own albums. How, do you mind sharing about, what age and what level and all that stuff?
Right. Well, the albums was a recent thing. The filmmaking was certainly like a passion that exposed itself a little bit earlier than the album making, which has been recent. But the filmmaking, I've always wanted to tell stories, right? And that has taken so many forms throughout my life. Like in high school, I was certain I was going to be a fantasy novel writer. I was certain of that all the way through college, right? That's what I decided I was going to do. And then in college, I got interested in journalism, and I was like, I'm going to tell human stories about real people, and I'm going to put myself in the line of fire to get those amazing human stories, right? And then I realized I'm kind of a coward. So like, you know what? I'm just going to make up stories. I'm going to go back to making up stories. So I guess I got a little bit scattered there, but yeah, the filmmaking I got pushed into a little bit. And then the thing is, once you start the process of making a movie, right, like you learn how to write a script, and then you're like, well, I have a vision for how I want to bring it to life. And then you realize, and you start actually putting together the logistics of producing, you're like, man, I could save so much more money if I used my own music. Right. Exactly. Like, oh, I could, I could probably save on hiring like an assembly editor if I can learn to do a little bit of editing on my own before I pass it off to a real editor. I could do some assembly editing, right?
And time. You save time because you have to search and you have to, find the right person. And
yeah. And the goal, of course, right, is always to get to the point in your career where you could secure the funding, where you can pay everybody what they're worth, right?
Yep. Like, at least.
Exactly. But in the early stages, like being able to do as many of the things as possible, those cost saving measures will really kind of launch a career, right? Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And so you alternate between your musical career and your filmmaking career. So share with our listeners some of the things that you've been doing, say, over the last 5 years.
Sure. Okay. So, God, I'm gonna have to
get down.
I'm gonna break out some liquor. I guess the caveat is with the music is that the music I've kind of given up on a little bit right now. It was like a phase of my life where like I had a lot of emotions that seemed like really to be best expressed in song, right? And it's something that I had always wanted to do. The filmmaking has been more of a constant since I graduated from college. So the last 5 years, I mean, if I could back it up to like the last 10 years, right? Because I had made my first feature film in 2011. And that was like a major undertaking for me because I'd never gone to film school. And prior to that, I had worked on like kind of industrial videos for a company. So I kind of had the basic gist of like how to get something on film, right. Proverbial, not actual film, but
right.
To get something in the can, let's say. But I had been creating YouTube content that had all gone viral. So in my head, I was thinking, oh, it's probably these days not that much of a leap to take those skills and apply them to actual filmmaking where I could make a product that could sell internationally and domestically and like, hit all the territories. And that was such a huge mistake that I made that I'm really glad I made. Right. And that's the best thing about life is that like you mistake your way into progress. Right.
That's why when people tell me sometimes like, why are you listening to that person's advice? Because, they've never amounted to anything. They've never succeeded. And I'm like, do you realize how much gold there is inside that old suitcase that's been battered and tattered and how much someone has learned from making mistakes?
Yeah, what a cynical thing for those people to tell you. That's horrible.
And people say that all, and you hear people even just, like LinkedIn or something, like they'll post these things as, don't take advice from failures unless you want, and it's like, what is wrong with you? That's okay. You go that way and I'll go this way and I'll be better.
Yeah, I would never take advice from someone who's only succeeded. That's too much luck involved and probably some element of privilege,
right.
And so it was like, so I made that first film, right? It nearly killed me, right? It was really difficult, like dealing with, the big personalities that you get on a feature film, right? Like everybody's got some kind of vision. Everybody has like a lot of faith in their ability and those big personalities clash with each other. And it was such a slog getting it all the way through to completion that it nearly killed me. And at the end, we were able to sell that film internationally, domestically. It was called The Evil Inside. It was a horror film that I had written. And found the financing for and went through the trouble of like figuring out how to get it like to a sales agent and distribute it. And it was such a grueling process that by the time it was selling to these territories, I was no longer really able to feel the joy in it anymore. It was like, it should have been such a massive win for me, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't even 30 yet, and I had written and produced and acted in a feature film that was selling around the world, and you could get it in Redbox, when Redbox was a thing here, and you could find the DVD in Walmart, and that should have been a huge win for me. But I had been so traumatized by how hard it was, right? That it was kind of like a joyless experience. But
it's like they say about the journey, right? It's not the destination, it's the journey.
It's the journey, and it's the mileage in a way. And what was funny about that was the bright spot is that pain and that trauma lasted like a year. Right? Like when you're like devastated about how hard something is, you just think like, oh, I'm turned off of this forever. No, you get back on the horse pretty fast, right? Trauma fades pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then since then I produced in like live production, and I've worked for various production companies doing like digital projects and a lot of commercial stuff. But my passion was always to try to get another feature film off the ground. The thing about that is, right, that's like people have, Hollywood is scattered with stories of like how people got a movie made after 10 years of trying, right?
Well, yeah, it's a known thing that people try to make movies. So for every 100 people that set off to make a film, only maybe 10 of them actually finish it.
Right. It's a very, very low percentage, and just because of the mechanisms that work against you, right? Like everybody that's got money in Hollywood or anywhere has been approached 100 times a year about financing someone's movie, right? So it's been a slog. And the thing about it was, despite working in production and doing some really great creative projects for digital and being proud of all those elements of my career, I wanted to get back on the horse and really be able to do another feature film that could get distribution around the world. And I've had a lot of like near hits with like, screenplays that I've optioned, or like financiers that seemed really ready to pull the trigger and then ended up investing in another project instead, or, having some kind of financial difficulties that made it so that this was like the first thing that they didn't want to invest in, because movies are a very risky business. And then right before COVID, all the it was the perfect storm came together. I had the right script, the right investors who loved the script, the right like directors attached, and it looked like everything was going to be greenlit. I sent out the contracts. I hired the lawyers, sent out the contract. I was like ready to pop the champagne, and then COVID. Yep. So that was kind of what happened. Was like COVID starts, quarantine gets instated. The contracts are out to the various financiers who were all gung-ho to sign. A couple of them had their finances tied up in real estate. And suddenly, because the word was that this quarantine situation and the pandemic were going to result in like, real estate really taking a hit, some of the investors started getting really cold feet about it. And had the contracts gone out to them, just a few weeks prior, it wouldn't even have been a question, right? So found myself in lockdown, like just blue-balled as a filmmaker. Oh, I don't know if that counts as profane. I should say Azure scrotumed. Sorry.
It's all good. No worries.
And that's kind of when I was like, these days you really could just make a movie on your phone.
So how long between the shock of COVID and the massive, pullout of these contracts and everything like that, between that and you going, I've got a phone and this is doable?
It didn't take that long at all. I would say about
2 hours.
Right. As soon as they announced it, I whipped out my phone. No, probably about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in, pretty much as soon as, I don't handle, I don't handle setbacks really well. And I say that in the right way, right? Like
Yeah.
I try to be defiant. If like there's a setback, I try to find a way around it. And that's a pretty major setback to have half of your financing be up in the air all of a sudden, right? That's effectively like your project. It feels like having to start over from the top. So, and then not being able to have the conversations again about the money. Like it would have been very insensitive of me, I think, to push these people who are already worried about where their finances are going to be, like to push them to give me an answer on when they would be willing to sign contracts. So the human
So
in me,
you look for another route, basically.
Yep. And as soon as I thought, like, I wonder if it's possible to make an entire movie on my phone, in my apartment, because obviously at that time, at the very start of quarantine, we couldn't leave, right? Like people didn't know whether.
It was crazy.
Yeah, people didn't know if masks worked. People didn't. There was the information was like so nebulous out there, and everybody I knew was just kind of like the groceries were gone, right? Toilet paper was gone.
That's right.
Felt like the apocalypse. And so
Yeah.
the idea was like, well, what do I do in my apartment? I'm going to try to have my spirit prevail as a filmmaker. And it sounded at the time so crazy, like at which it's like, is it possible? And the thing is, traditional filmmaking, you're thinking like, well, no, it's not, because you're going to need, everything. You're going to need people to pull focus. You're going to need people to move the camera. You're going to need, and as I started working it through in my head, right, I'm like, well, if I just get really wide shots on my phone, I could always digitally create camera movement, right? If I know which way I want this shot to pan or, or tilt. And then every problem I came up with, I could come up with a solution using modern technology.
That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. And then, but that's like the thing is like, there's all the excuses got eliminated, right? And when you find yourself with no excuses, you have to do it. And that was the tragedy of it. It was like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to make this movie.
So at that rate, did you get anybody involved while you were going through this process?
So part of the fun of it, I think, was how much of it could I do on my own, because I knew I couldn't get people to come to my apartment. That'd be really irresponsible at the time.
Yeah.
Right. I also kind of felt a pressure to put a good kind of pressure to put my money where my mouth was, because I'm a instructor for Save the Cat, which is this very, very, prolific screenwriting principles. I guess it's like a company or organization, right? I like to think of it as more of an organization, because we also have like, a community of screenwriters that like come for tips, and we have classes and things like that. So one of the things that I try to tell as many people as possible through that organization is, if you have a story, if you have a strong, compelling story that is solid because you've kind of girded the framework of it, and it's a passion of yours to tell that story, nothing is going to stop you.
Right on.
Nothing can stop you. And whether you tell that story in a big budget way or a small budget way that you can then use as a proof of concept to sell to make it a big budget thing, right? You should be able to do it. And I've been touting that message for so long. And here we are in this situation where it's like the perfect set of restrictions. If I truly believe that you could tell a story no matter what, if you really have it in your heart, and I'm going around telling all these people, I better prove it, right?
Right.
And so it was like this challenge. I was like, okay, I'm in my apartment. I can't rent camera equipment. I can't call crew over. Can we do this with a phone? And then I wrote the script, right? And I wrote the script with all of that in mind. Like, anything that seemed difficult just wasn't in the story anymore. Like, I'm going to write the script in a way that it's completely possible with a cell phone or with digital movement in post-production. And then I just started making myself do it. And let me tell you, that process was not fun. And because it was, to your point, lonely, right? Uh, the part of the fun of storytelling and
Plus, you kind of had to motivate yourself every single day
oh,
to keep rolling the camera, basically, even though, you know.
oh my gosh, the mistake that I made is the, opening scene of this film is this character working out, right? And
Yeah.
so the first day when I had finished shooting myself on a stationary bike for like 2 hours straight from different angles, I was like, I'm over this. I don't want to do it anymore. I was like, this was a stupid idea. Let's just cancel the project. I haven't lost any money. So let's just say it's a wrap. Um, and
But you're so creative. And I think most of our listeners who are creative people know that the little secret inside of them, the little secret personality is the one that actually loves challenges.
oh, that's very positive of you to say. And I'll humbly accept it, right? Because that's the thing is the chat. Like once you like meet the first challenge, you owe it to yourself to keep going. And then the more you have behind you, like the more boxes you've ticked, the more you feel like you owe it to yourself to keep going. And then before you know, you're at the end. So
like in that movie, The Point of No Return.
yes, there's a point of no return, and if you're a certain type of person, every point is the point of no return, right? every effort you've made should not be wasted. Now you're like, well, now I have to do this next thing. So it was a lonely process until I got my co-star into it, and the co-star Eric Raddick, who's an amazing actor and a very good sport, he Skyped in his entire performance, which is funny. And
that is so cool.
And it was, thank you. It was, it's motivated by the story. So it does make sense. It's as nutty as it sounds. But for the first 30 days of filming, it was just me acting like a psycho in my own apartment, right? Like locking off a camera on a tiny tripod.
And I have to share with our listeners, because I don't want to give away the plot, but I do have to share that, okay, a lot of the films that are out there right now, right? They're, about people stuck in lockdown, making movies, and the story is around being in lockdown.
Right.
And your story isn't technically being in lockdown. You looked for an alternative parallel story to that, and I loved it.
Oh, thank you. It's I'm happy to give some of it away, unless you don't think I should.
Well, no, you're the content creator here. And you're in control of how much you want to give away and not. I just don't want to be the one to blow it and have you go later go, oh my God, you gave out the whole.
I could tell you've been doing this a while. That's very diplomatic of you. Like the general premise of the movie is called Charon, is that it's a woman who, she's a hacker who was, prosecuted for like a massive hacking crime. So she's under house arrest. And because of that situation, she's not able to leave. And her only contact from the outside world is like her boyfriend, who is allowed as part of her sentence. Like she's allowed to have one person contact her, certain, via it takes a little bit of suspension of disbelief, of course, but it's like, via a one-way IP or something. And, he's her boyfriend for however many months, or like a year and a half that she's under house arrest. And then everything is normal. And it's a thing she looks forward to every day. And then one day he starts acting strange. Right. And then
there you go. Now stop.
You're right. You know what? You're right. That's where I should stop. Yeah. And he starts acting strange. And that's the premise of the movie. So as you could see, the Skyping in is motivated as part of the plot. But I would say that's when the filming actually got fun, right? Because I filmed everything by myself in my apartment like a psycho for 30 days. And then when this actor came on board and we were Skyping, every night to get his performance, that was like real human interaction, which felt foreign at that point. and then that collaboration kicked in, and that's when I was reminded of like, oh yeah, this is the best part about filmmaking that unfortunately we were so deprived of during quarantine, right?
Wow.
Is that
True.
that you feel like you don't need it. I got to a point where I really didn't feel like I needed it, right? When I was doing the movie, I was like, you know what? Look at how much I am doing like by myself, like a psycho in my apartment. Like, wow, the human spirit can really endure without other people. Like, this is really some gritty, raw stuff. And then it wasn't until after, like, I had my co-star Eric Raddick start taking part in the process, and like, us bouncing ideas about how we were going to play the scene together, then I was realized like, I was fooling myself. That way of filmmaking that I was engaged in is not sustainable, right? And it was like a shadow of what filmmaking should be, which is this great collaborative process with different people bringing their talents to the table. And then after that, of course, after we filmed his scenes and I edited it, then we had my wonderful composer, and she did sound design too, Diana Cha, come in, and then that was a joy. And then I had these two girls, Layla and Stan, come in, and they did the coloring for it, all the color timing, and kind of had, it was like it was a journey. I had my fire reignited. Right? Like I was like, wow, all these people came together. They really came together from everywhere, and we didn't even have to be in the same room to put together this project. And this was
That's true. That's so magical.
It was incredible. And I'm like, and it totally eased the pain of having the other project that was like my hopes and dreams for years, at least being sidelined for now. So it was like the perfect medicine. Is like, oh, it's like that thing that they tell you about boyfriends, right? The best way to go over the last one is to get into the next one. So
right.
It was like this lost film of mine. I wasn't mourning for the moment because I was making a new one. So
yeah, you were still in control.
Still creating stuff and still being an artist for what that's worth.
That's amazing though. And then so the thing is, like, when in the beginning of the movie and everything, you were just talking about the wide angles and things like that, but you almost don't realize that this was all shot by you with a tripod or anything like that for the most part, because the story is so thick.
Wow.
There's so much to the story that you forget. Like the camera, like I've watched mobile films where the camera is another character in the story, and in this story, the camera really is sort of like just doesn't have a role in the story. It's all so intense about the story that you're conveying. You're also a good actress, by the way.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Or actor, I should say.
Yeah.
But the relationship that you were having, and the feelings and the emotions that you were feeling, even through your boyfriend, the character, your boyfriend, you were talking through a screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so honestly so relieved to hear you say that. Because it was one of the, this falls into the category of a confession, right? Like, is one of the worst things about making this movie was, some of the shots were like selfie angles, right? And to have to, perform while holding your phone like a selfie, was horrible. There were a lot of takes that were completely unusable because, there was no way I could get into the scene while taking essentially a selfie. So I would have to do them over and over and over again until I had a usable take, right? And then there were times when I set up the camera on the tripod, which most of the shots were just tripod shots. But I didn't have eyes on what the framing was, so I'd have to set up the camera and then step in front of the camera to hit my mark and just hope that the shot was where I wanted it. And
I've been there.
Oh, girl, like one out of every 3 times it was off. So even if I stepped in front and did the performance I felt like was the take, and I'd go and check the footage, I'm like, oh yeah, this is crap. I can't use it because.
So how many times did you bump into something and, kill a toe or something? Like, I've done that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Like even bumping into the tripod and just having everything ruined, or like stepping too hard even on something and having the camera shake in the middle of the, because it's a cell phone, right? Like it doesn't have like stabilization, and it's not on a gimbal, and it's not on a Steadicam rig, so it's like a tiny little mobile thing that any slight movement will produce like a movement on the camera that you don't want. So it was I'm so relieved to hear you say that the camera didn't feel like it was a presence. That was a challenge on this project for sure. Very, very stupidly frustrating. but
because it's one of the things in mobile filmmaking though that people creatively, and it works a lot of times, you know what I'm saying, but it just depends on the story, but your story, like I said, it's so engulfing, you get so wrapped up in the story. And I think too that people can connect with what was going on, the plot in the story, and then as everything is climaxing, it's almost like a mystery, and it was a mystery, right? And so you're so involved in that, and you're kind of trying to figure it out.
Oh, I love that.
Like, where is this going? Wait, hold on a second. And, you're feeling for the character, and you're going, oh my God, hello, and then, I mean, it's not like you're shouting to the screen or anything, but, you forget that there is a camera there at all, which is the good thing about most movies. You know what I'm saying? Who cares about the camera?
Right. It's like you're getting a voyeuristic peek, like you're a ghost who gets to watch things unfold. Oh, this is like
and it helps you be there.
Yeah.
That's a whole part of stepping into somebody else's shoes. Well, you're just a bystander experiencing this, and at the same time connecting with the character.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Oh, Susie, this is like therapy for me. Hearing you say things that I was hoping I had conveyed is like really, it's like a weight off my shoulders.
Well, I get it. I got it.
I love it. Yeah.
So share a little bit with our audience, a little bit about, once you had everything filmed. And by the way, share a little bit before we even go there. Share a little bit about how you worked the fight scene, because, again, This was COVID time. We're still there.
Yeah. Well, I had the great fortune of the guy that I usually will spar with or do little, action sequences on camera, just for fun in a lot of cases, or just for YouTube, is this great guy named Mark Moriso. And he happened to be a father-to-be at the time that COVID hit, right? So he necessarily had to be hard quarantined because his wife was about to give birth, right? So he was like, he was the one telling me about, like, make a sanitation station in your, like, anything that comes through your door. This is where we didn't know how virulent the virus was, right? So it was like anything that comes through your door, you like spray down with Lysol, and then you let it sit for 24 hours, and then you wipe everything down. So he was kind of like my quarantine buddy in that survivalist kind of way. And we knew that for the fight sequence that was going to happen in the movie, the only way to do it safely was for me to be completely quarantined. I'm like, that's no problem at all. That's what I've been doing for this film. I knew for certain that he was hard quarantined because of the stakes, right? Because of the fact that he was about to have a child. So we were like very certain that neither of us had seen or had any contact with the outside world for like over a month at that point, that he came to my apartment and we did the fight sequence. The timing was interesting though. So so this gets a little bit, it gets interesting. Do I have permission to talk about it? I guess.
Yes, go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
So
this is your story.
So we had decided right from the start that we were going to save this fight sequence for the end of the shoot. The last thing that I was going to shoot because we wanted to, like, possibly like wait out whatever the pandemic was at that point. And we are like, maybe the danger will have passed by, the time we have to get around to shooting it, and blah, 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 and which was very naive and hopeful of us at the time. Right. So as this was the last thing that we were going to shoot, of course, the pandemic was not over, but Black Lives Matter, the protests had just begun, right, over the George Floyd situation. And
so this was in May, right?
This was in May, yes. So we had saved that scene to shoot, and then the day that we had decided that we were going to do it, like in the weeks prior, this, the world had erupted in this thing. And I've always been very, very attuned to social media, like social justice. This has been a big, big soapbox of mine, and something that I've had my finger on the pulse of. Both me and my sister are just maybe a little bit zealous about it, right? But like,
well, it affects you so personally, so
yeah, absolutely. And in LA, in particular, we have all the police brutality, and so I've had a lot of I have a lot of Black friends as an artist, right? As a musician, those worlds. There are a lot of Black artists that I've interacted with, and a lot of Black friends that I've had throughout my life. And so I know that there are two Americas, right? I've ridden in cars with my Black friends, gotten pulled over, and saw how differently they're treated than when I'm pulled over. But I don't think any of us really knew the extent to which this was such a massive, massive problem until Black Lives Matter came to the forefront of national attention, and all the stuff, Breonna Taylor, right? Like all of.
Yeah, because I think we were also all in lockdown, and we were sort of forced to consume what the media was showing, and YouTube and things like that, because most people couldn't just go out and work. They were working from home or lost their jobs.
Right.
And you're stuck. So
and suddenly you're, every now and then you get a story about like the horrible injustices, the most egregious injustices that Black people face. But at this time, because of, us being, the state of the nation, and us all being home and being in front of the screens all the time, we got like a rapid fire succession of just how horrible this problem is, right? We got all the egregious stories of all these, all the Black people that were unjustly killed, and, their reality, and the fact that there are all these safeguards in place that law enforcement doesn't have to face repercussions for it, and just how horrible, like, the disparity is. And we got those, whereas before we got those stories every now and then. Now we're getting them like every day, every hour. We were learning how prevalent this problem was. And the thing was, the night that Mark was going to come over and shoot his sequence, right, was the first night of curfews in Los Angeles. That was the height of, the protests and like the riots that were going on, and everybody was on edge. And I realized, because we were planning out the shoot, I'd have to have my windows open for us to get the proper lighting, right? Mark is much bigger than me, right? He's an athlete. He's a martial artist. He teaches martial arts. And for the scene, because of the way we planned it, he was going to have a mask on, right? So it was going to look from the outside of my apartment like I was getting attacked, right? And because of the state of, just things at the moment, I kind of realized, like, people don't give Black people the benefit of the doubt, especially when a situation looks like that, as cut and dry, right? Like you could be in a bedroom sleeping, in the case of Breonna, and get shot. So if my friend has a mask on and is slamming me into walls, right? Like the panic that started.
And you were in an upstairs apartment too. And apartments are like paper walls in California.
Yeah. And as soon as I processed the situation, I was like, if anybody in my apartment complex, out of like good kindness of their heart, thinks I'm in trouble and they call the cops, it is likely that questions will not get asked by officers, that they'll just react to what they see, right? And that caused me so much panic. And Mark was like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, I'm freaking worried about it. It seems
Yeah.
like a situation we should be worried about. I cried like a child all day. Like I was like, and I thought at the time, this movie is not worth the danger that we're putting him in, right? So I took the time to like go around my complex and literally explain to everybody at a safe distance, right? I'd knock on their door and then
Good
like
for you.
back up and all the way and be like, oh, this is gonna be weird. There's a fight sequence happening in my apartment later tonight. Please don't call the cops. There's nothing wrong. And I made sure I hit up everybody in the complex, but it was interesting. Right?
That's what you're supposed to do when you're shooting in your house anyways. just so that everybody can turn on their their weed whackers and
Right, exactly. Really try to ruin your shot.
Right.
And in retrospect, did I overreact? Did I don't think so. Given the stakes, given the climate at the time, given the things that we had all as a nation learned about just how bad the problem is. And
I don't think you can be too careful right now.
Yeah, it was a unexpected, interesting part of the shoot. And of course the sequence went great. And Mark, was.
Yeah, you got beat up.
Yeah. Yeah. He was amused that I was so worried about it, but he's had to live with the reality his whole life. And, for the rest of us, we're privileged to not have to feel endangered by the society we live in, on those levels. It was like the first time we're really confronting the fact that stuff happened. So it was horrible. It was.
So so did you have to coordinate a lot on the choreography on that?
So Mark is a choreographer, and what I really, really appreciated with him is, I trust him with the choreography, right? Especially in that case, I'm very little and he's very large. And so he knows what is and isn't safe to do to me. So I was very much in his hands for like, I'm not going to give too much input on what I want to do in this fight, because he knows like what is going to be safe.
The result.
Yeah. Because we weren't working in a traditional situation where there's like, there's like crash pads and things that'll keep me safe. There's nothing here. This is my apartment. So, the danger was just a little bit more elevated, right?
And just like a party.
Yeah, it's just your typical party of two people beating each other up. And so what I really loved, and I'm so glad you asked me the question, actually, because I can actually reveal something about about his genius, right? Was in my head, I was like, this female character that I play, Charon, is actually kind of a badass. Like she's had some training, and in my head, I was like, this fight sequence can really be a full-on knockdown, drag-out fight. And then when I talked to him and he read the script, he went, she wouldn't be a badass though. Like she is a badass in that she works out and she's had martial arts training, but that's so different when you're sparring with a martial arts person.
Then knowing your fighting moves and all that.
Yeah, then like you're getting attacked in your apartment. You're not suddenly becoming Bruce Lee, when somebody invades your house, right? So the fight is going to look more raw. It's not going to look as skilled. It's not going to look like the Matrix. And he was explaining all this to me. I'm like, that's so smart. It takes a person who choreographs for movies to, and who like values the reality of what a fight is like, to be able to inform the choreography. And
yeah, because you don't want to have your audience go, yeah, right.
Yeah, like suddenly she's a kung fu master, right?
Right.
It wouldn't make any sense. You haven't seen her do any of that stuff other than like her working out and running.
But you do know that she's upset and she's feeling a bit vengeful.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah, exactly. Things don't go well for her for quite a while. So his genius, right, with doing the fight choreography was like, he really delved into what the character is, what realistically she could do, how she would realistically feel in the situation. And he brought that out in how he put the fight together. That's not anything that I would have you know, contemplated that level, which is again why you like collaboration is so wonderful, right?
It's true.
Um, and so I was really excited about that sequence in the end because I get beat up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Which is
Well,
different.
but it's you were a very determined woman as a character. You were on a mission in a way. So it's not like, oh, I got beat up and I give up, or I'm just a victim here. You were determined to do something.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away of the movie.
Yeah.
When you were done
Mm-hmm.
with all the production, how did you? Sorry, there was like a Harley Davidson, I think, going by here.
It's all right.
When you were done with the production,
Uh-huh.
what happened to? How did you coordinate this with the rest of your crew, the post-production team?
Right. Oh, you know what's so funny that I should really mention?
Yeah.
I edited it on a phone as well. So
yes, you should mention this.
that's the part that everybody I've shown the film to doesn't believe me on, right? Because it looks like it was edited in traditional software. But that's how far cell phone technology has advanced now, right? Like the processors in our smartphones are fast. They like you could shoot 4K footage on phones now, and actually like importing that into a video editing app that's phone based is actually possible, even though it's
well, it's crazy for a feature length film, because that must have been gigabytes after gigabytes. I don't know how much space you have on your phone, but it's also huge. Where you have your photos and your,
Yeah. So I cleared everything off my phone to do this.
Right.
So I exported, like I put everything into like the cloud, right? And then I was like, my phone for the next, couple months is just going to be the camera and the editing machine. And the app that I use, something called Video Shop, which is an app that the developer created to make social media videos. He had not designed the app to be able to edit feature films, but it had, when I looked at it, when I looked through all the features, it had everything in it that I could professionally edit with, right? Like you could you could separate the track from the audio track from the thing. You could slice it up any which way. You could apply transitions, crossfade certain things, and so it was a little bit clunky. Obviously it wouldn't be as smooth as like using a mouse, but I could actually use my finger and like adjust things frame by frame and it was, while it was a little bit tedious, the benefit of it was I could shoot all day and then get in my bed in my PJs and literally be lying on my back editing the scene from that day using my phone. And piecing it all together was, I edited it in chunks, right? And then I would export those chunks and then like import them onto the timeline. So it was not the most elegant process, but in the end, it was an entire feature film edited with an app. And when I contacted the developer, he watched it the same day, which was I was really surprised by. And he came back and said, like, this is incredible that you did this on my app, because to his knowledge, no one else had done anything like that. And I was just happy to let him know that it was possible.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think anyone else probably would have done that with an app like that. Most people look to more serious, for movie making apps.
Exactly. And
for editing.
And the thing is, I didn't have those apps on my phone, on my computer at home, right?
Yeah.
Like in my line of work, there was always a post-production department. So go to the editing bay, and then you work with your editor to edit it, and they would, know what they're doing and stuff. So my rule to myself with this project was at the start of quarantine, I was going to make it only with what I had in my apartment. And I didn't have an app, and I could have, not an app, the software. And I could have bought the software, but as soon as I figured out it was possible to edit it on my phone, then it was kind of like an irresistible challenge for me to try to do that. And I'm
Amazing.
honestly kind of grateful that it worked out, because it could have been a disaster. But then I will say that after I had picture lock, at that point, I'd reached the limit of what I could do on my phone. So then at that point,
you couldn't even send an email at that point.
No, exactly. The whole thing was just like, I needed to get the project off of my phone and over to people that had the software to do things. And of course, that process was like, post-production sound happened via my friend Diana Cha. It was amazing. So she did the sound design, and she did the music. She composed all with the professional software. And then the colorists, of course, they use the DaVinci suite. And it's hilarious, right? Because they're using these really, really professional, it's all the professional software.
So they basically took the cake out of the Easy Bake Oven.
Yes. And decorated it like it was
in a gourmet kitchen.
Yeah, and turned it into a wedding cake, right?
Right.
And it was astonishing that I've been entering it in festivals, and it's getting accepted. It's getting nominated for things, which I was so.
You're gonna get like 500, festivals. I would think it's just.
I've been very surprised at how many of the festivals are accepting it, and it's really just a testament to what's possible on phones now. I started the journey not knowing if it was possible, and ended up kind of realizing that more than I thought was possible is possible on a phone. So it was really cool. It was cool. It was a cool learning process, and honestly, for me, a huge risk. That I'm just grateful and lucky that it worked out. Yeah, and then I had I have my collaborators to thank for the sound and for the color to make it look cinematic, and yeah, it all came together.
It did, and it's a great story.
Thank you.
You did the whole process. You didn't take any shortcuts, even though you had a lot of limitations. You basically challenged I feel like I'm giving you a little bit of a wrap up review here. But it's incredible what people can do when they put their minds to it. And it's one of the things, when there are people out there that will say there's no way you can make a serious movie with the phone, or it's too hard or something like that. It's like, it's not that it's too hard. It's just, it takes patience and persistence. And it takes someone like you in a way too, because you have to, like most creative people, you have to see the challenge and realize how much you're going to learn from a challenge more than if it was just a smooth ride, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, you kind of also have to have a spirit of just like surrender in a way, right? Because it's not going to be perfect. Right? And in some cases, the shots aren't even going to be that good. Like the iPhone that I used was an iPhone 8, right? I didn't even have the best the newest generation phone, and the iPhone 8 doesn't handle low light very well, and the autofocus is like a little wonky. So they were just shots that they were never going to be perfect, especially the way I was doing it, where I'd had to push record and then step out in front of the camera, right? And part of the art is just having the attitude of like, you know what? It is what it is.
It is what it is. And here's the other thing too. It's perfect for the genre that you were doing, because I think sometimes when you have the perfect lighting and the perfect this and the perfect that, I will always say the audio has to be good, but when the visual is too perfect, it almost looks like a commercial.
Right. Yeah, for sure. This has a rawness to it that I am happy about. There are happy accidents, right? Like there's a moment when there are several moments where the camera's trying to find its focus. And when I watched it,
I didn't notice.
Oh,
because I was too engulfed in the story.
Well, I'm glad you didn't notice. Because I'm hoping what the result was in those tiny moments where the camera's trying to find the focus, it creates kind of like this
an effect.
Yeah, this effect where it looks like something is kind of strobing a little bit in and out. And those happy little accidents like throughout the footage, I was like, you know what?
That works.
Yeah, it works. And I'm gonna use that take. And it was not even an intention. So I can't even take credit for it.
It's like sometimes I've done a video montage or something like that, and then I'll slap a song to it. You know, I make my own music, by the way, too. I just use GarageBand. Yeah.
Perfect.
But I it's nothing major. It's just, you know, but I'll slap something on it and I'll be like, oh, look at that. I faded in and faded out at the right time. Ooh,
Yes.
you know, and it's like, you know, people think, oh, you're just tediously trying to make that work. You know, sometimes you do.
Yeah.
But other times it's just things just happen. And sometimes you don't have time for that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I come from video production myself. So I had to do a lot of quick projects like that where, you know, my clients would come and say, can you do that right now? Like 30 minutes, it's going to need to be presented to like 500 people in this.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
No pressure or anything. Oh my gosh.
Right. B-roll queen to the rescue.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, in your film, I'm sure that our listeners, every one of you needs to come to the film festival. You can afford the airfare since we're going virtual.
Yes, no excuses.
No excuses. That's right.
Uh-huh.
And watch her film. And we're probably going to have a Q&A thing with you during the festival as well.
Oh, cool.
And just surprise, Jennifer.
No pressure.
So, right. But yeah, I hope that if you don't mind, now that we're going to wrap up this first part of the podcast, because remember, guys, we've got that next podcast that's coming on Patreon, with the secret question and the secret answer.
And I'll make sure it's worth it. I'll answer in a way that's juicy. There we go.
Nice. But one word of advice that you could give to our filmmaking friends who are interested in making movies with smartphones, and maybe some of those who have made a lot of short films and are ready for a feature on a smartphone. Mm-hmm. What would that advice be?
My advice would be, okay, so this seems a little bit strange to say, right? Because it makes it sound like I'm asking people to lower their standards, but I'm not. It's easy to defeat yourself by creating a challenge that's too hard, right? And with cell phone movies, sometimes you have to adjust your plan, right? And do something that's within the realm of possibility that's also like easier for you to do. You'll be happy with the results in a way that you didn't expect, right? So if you're trying to achieve something too crazy with your cell phone and too ambitious, and you can't pull it off, just know that sometimes the simplicity can be better, right? So there were things that I did in this film that I wanted to achieve that were stupid, right? Like at one point I was like, I really want camera movement in this, that I'm going to create a rig on wheels. I'm going to push my cell phone on this rig that has wheels on it. Then I'm going to run in front of the camera and hope that it captures things as it's whizzing by on like a skate, right? And everything that I try, and it took so many hours to get that to work functionally. And when I looked at the shot, I'm like, it looks like garbage. And I just wasted half a day doing it, right? And then I was like, I'm just going to go really wide. I'm just going to make this shot a really wide, lonely looking thing that this cell phone is going to handle very well, right? And it was a beautiful shot. And I felt silly trying to do too much with that cell phone. Right? So give yourself the permission to just go simple and beautiful with what you want to accomplish with a mobile phone.
Nice. Well, stand by, guys. Go to our Patreon page. And meanwhile, say goodbye, Jennifer.
Oh, goodbye. Thank you for having me, Susie. This was such an honor and a pleasure to gab about the movie as long as you've let me gab. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll see you guys on the next one.